There's a moment, just before someone offers you comfort, when their eyes flicker with something else. It happens so fast you might miss it. A micro-expression, a subtle shift in the muscles around their mouth, a barely perceptible tightening of the jaw. In that fraction of a second, before the warmth floods their face and their hand reaches for yours, there exists a calculation. Not cold, not cruel, but undeniably present. A whisper in their mind that asks, "What will this cost me, and what will I gain?" You see, empathy is not the pure spring we pretend it to be. It is not water flowing freely from some divine source within us. No, empathy is a river that has been dammed, redirected, channeled through the architecture of our ego. And the ego, that magnificent engineer of the self, never builds without purpose. Every bridge it constructs, every pathway it carves, serves a design that ultimately leads back to itself. This is not cynicism. This is observation. This is the truth that lives beneath the skin of every kind gesture, every compassionate word, every moment when we claim to put another before ourselves. The truth is that we cannot escape the self, even when we are most convinced we have transcended it. Especially then, consider the person who rushes to help a stranger in distress. Watch them closely, not with judgment, but with curiosity. See how their body moves with urgency, how their voice takes on that particular tone of concern, how their entire being seems to orient toward the suffering of another. Beautiful, is it not? The human capacity for care, for connection, for stepping outside the fortress of our own experience to meet someone in theirs. But now, watch a little longer. Watch what happens after. See the way they carry themselves differently for the rest of the day. Notice the story they tell at dinner, the subtle pride in their voice, the way they frame themselves as the protagonist in a narrative of goodness. Observe how they sleep a little better that night, wrapped in the warm blanket of their own virtue. This is not to diminish the help they gave. The stranger was still helped. The suffering was still eased. The action was real and its effects were real. But so too was the reward, the internal reward, the ego's reward, the confirmation that I am good, I am worthy, I am the kind of person who does the right thing. And in that confirmation, the ego grows stronger, more defined, more certain of its own shape and substance. Before we continue, a warning. The knowledge that is about to be shared cannot be unlearned. It will permanently change the way you see human relationships. If you are ready to abandon comfortable illusions and see what is behind the stage, subscribe now, because this is not just a video. It is the beginning of your journey under the mask. Now let us begin. The mask of empathy is perhaps the most seductive we wear because it allows us to believe we are not wearing a mask at all. It is the disguise that convinces us we have removed all disguises. When we feel genuine care for another, when tears spring to our eyes at their pain, when we sacrifice our time or resources or comfort for their benefit, we experience this as proof of our authenticity, our depth, our transcendence of selfish concern. And in that experience, the ego finds its most sophisticated hiding place. Think about the last time you comforted someone. Really think about it. Reconstruct the scene in your mind with honesty. There they were, vulnerable, perhaps crying, perhaps angry, perhaps lost in some private hell you could only glimpse from the outside. And there you were, present, attentive, offering what you could. Words, silence, touch, space, whatever the moment seemed to require. You felt their pain, did you not? It resonated in your chest, created an ache in your throat, made your own eyes sting with sympathetic tears. This is empathy, we say. This is connection. This is love. But underneath that resonance, underneath that ache, there was something else. A part of you that was aware of yourself being empathetic. A part that was watching the scene from a slight distance, noting your own performance, evaluating your responses, adjusting your approach based on some internal metric of effectiveness. A part that felt, even in the midst of genuine care, a small warm glow of satisfaction at being the kind of person who could provide this comfort, who was needed, who was trusted, who was good. This is the ego, working its magic. It does not announce itself. It does not wave a flag and declare its presence. It simply weaves itself into the fabric of every experience, including and especially those experiences we believe to be selfless. The ego is not the villain in this story. It is simply the author, writing itself into every scene, making sure it always has a role, always has lines, always remains essential to the plot. Now let us go deeper. Let us examine the mechanics of this beautiful deception. How does the ego hide inside empathy? How does it transform genuine feeling into fuel for itself? The answer lies in understanding what the ego actually is and what it needs to survive. The ego is not a thing. It is a process. It is the ongoing construction of a self-concept, a story we tell about who we are. This story requires constant maintenance, constant reinforcement, constant evidence that it is true. The ego is like a plant that needs very specific nutrients, and those nutrients come from our interactions with the world and with others. Every experience is filtered through the question, what does this say about me? Every relationship is evaluated through the lens, how does this define me? And every act of empathy, every moment of genuine care, becomes another brick in the edifice of self. When you help someone, you are not just helping them. You are also confirming to yourself that you are helpful. When you listen with compassion, you are not just listening. You are also proving to yourself that you are compassionate. When you sacrifice for another, you are not just sacrificing. You are also building the identity of someone who sacrifices. The action and the self-construction happen simultaneously, inseparably, like two sides of the same coin spinning through the air. This is why empathy feels so good. Yes, there is the genuine pleasure of connection, the deep mammalian satisfaction of bonding, the relief of shared burden. But there is also the ego's pleasure, the quiet satisfaction of self-confirmation, the strengthening of the story we tell about ourselves. And the ego is clever enough to hide this second pleasure inside the first, to make them feel like one thing, to convince us that we are motivated purely by care, when we are also, always, motivated by the need to maintain our self-concept. Consider the person who defines themselves as empathetic. For them, empathy is not just a capacity or a choice. It is an identity. It is who they are. And like all identities, it must be defended, maintained, performed. They must seek out opportunities to be empathetic. They must notice suffering, must position themselves as helpers, must ensure that their empathy is seen and recognized, if not by others, then at least by themselves. Their empathy becomes a kind of addiction, not to helping others, but to the feeling of being a helper, to the confirmation of their identity, to the ego's endless hunger for proof of its own existence. This is where empathy can become manipulation, though the person doing it may never realize it. When your identity depends on being needed, you will unconsciously seek out or even create situations where you are needed. When your sense of self requires you to be the compassionate one, the understanding one, the one who always knows what to say, you will find yourself drawn to people who are struggling, who are vulnerable, who will provide you with opportunities to perform your role. And in that performance, in that dance of care and need, power dynamics emerge that have nothing to do with genuine connection and everything to do with ego maintenance. The helper needs the helped. The strong needs the weak. The wise needs the confused. The empathetic needs the suffering, not because they are cruel, not because they wish harm, but because their identity depends on these roles existing and being played out. And so, without ever intending to, without ever consciously choosing to, they may keep people in positions of need. They may offer help that does not quite solve the problem. They may provide comfort that soothes, but does not empower. They may create dependencies that serve their egos, need to be needed more than they serve the other person's need to grow. This is the dark side of empathy that we rarely discuss. The way it can become a tool of control, a method of maintaining power, a strategy for keeping ourselves at the center of other people's stories. And the most insidious part is that it feels like love. It looks like care. It wears the costume of selflessness so convincingly that even the person doing it cannot see the ego pulling the strings behind the curtain. But let us not stop at the helper. Let us turn our gaze to the other side of this dynamic, to the person receiving empathy, to the one who is vulnerable, who is suffering, who is in need. What is happening in their ego? What mask are they wearing? Here too, the ego is at work, though its operation is more subtle, more hidden even from itself. When we are in pain, when we are struggling, when we reach out for help, We experience this as pure need, as raw vulnerability, as the opposite of ego. We feel small, exposed, stripped of our defenses. We believe we are showing our true selves, unmasked and honest. But the ego does not disappear in vulnerability. It simply changes its strategy. Vulnerability can be a form of power. Not always, not in all contexts, but in the right circumstances, with the right audience. Showing weakness can be the strongest move available. It invites care, demands attention, creates obligation. It positions you at the center of someone else's concern. It makes you matter. And the ego, always seeking confirmation of its existence, always hungry for evidence that it is real and important and worthy of attention, learns to use vulnerability as a tool. Watch someone who has mastered this art. They do not perform their pain crudely. They do not demand sympathy or fish for compliments. No, their vulnerability is subtle, authentic seeming, perfectly calibrated to evoke the response they need. They share just enough to create concern, but not so much that they seem needy. They show weakness in ways that make others feel strong. They position their suffering as something that the right person, the right care, the right empathy could ease. And in doing so, they create a role for you. They write you into their story as the helper, the savior, the one who understands. And you, with your own egos, need to be that person. Step willingly into the role. You feel chosen, trusted, needed. You feel that your empathy is special, that your care is uniquely effective, that you have a connection with this person that others do not. And in that feeling, both egos are fed. The vulnerable person gets attention, care, confirmation that they matter. The empathetic person gets purpose, identity, confirmation that they are good. It is a perfect symbiosis of ego needs, disguised as authentic human connection. This is not to say that all vulnerability is manipulation. Pain is real. Suffering is real. The need for connection and support is real and legitimate and human. But the ego is always present, always working, always finding ways to serve itself even in our most genuine moments. The person who is truly suffering and the person who is performing suffering may look identical from the outside, may even feel identical from the inside, because the ego has learned to hide its operations even from the conscious mind. Think about your own moments of vulnerability. Think about the times you have shared your pain with someone. Was there not, underneath the genuine need for comfort, a small part of you that was aware of how you were being perceived? A part that chose which details to share and which to withhold? A part that calibrated your emotional display to achieve a certain effect? A part that felt, even in the midst of real pain, a small satisfaction when the other person responded with the care you needed? This is not shameful. This is not evidence that you are fake or manipulative or bad. This is simply how the ego works. It is the background process running constantly, managing your self-concept, protecting your sense of identity, ensuring that even in your weakest moments you maintain some form of control over how you are seen and understood. The problem arises when we deny this, when we insist that our empathy is pure, that our vulnerability is total, that we have transcended ego in our relationships, because that denial creates a blind spot, and in that blind spot, the ego operates with even more freedom. When we believe we are not being manipulative, we do not watch for manipulation in ourselves. When we believe we are being completely authentic, we do not notice the ways we are performing. When we believe we have removed our masks, we do not see that we have simply put on a more sophisticated one. The mask of authenticity, the mask of vulnerability, the mask of empathy. These are the most dangerous masks because they convince us we are not wearing masks at all. They allow the ego to operate in plain sight, disguised as its opposite, protected by our own belief in our selflessness. So what does this mean? Are we doomed to be forever trapped in ego? Is genuine connection impossible? Is every act of care tainted by self-interest? The answer is both yes and no. The ego is inescapable. It is part of the structure of human consciousness. As long as we have a sense of self, as long as we experience ourselves as separate individuals with our own perspectives and needs and identities, the ego will be present. But recognizing this, truly seeing it, changes everything. When you see the ego at work in your empathy, when you catch yourself feeling that warm glow of self-satisfaction after helping someone, When you notice the way you tell the story of your own compassion, something shifts. Not because you stop feeling empathy, not because you stop helping, but because you stop believing your own performance. You stop taking the ego's narrative at face value. You develop what we might call double vision, the ability to act with genuine care while simultaneously seeing the ego's involvement in that care. This double vision is uncomfortable. It removes the simple pleasure of feeling purely good about yourself. It introduces complexity into moments that used to feel straightforward. It makes you question your own motivations in ways that can feel paralyzing. But it is also liberating, because when you see the ego clearly, when you understand its mechanisms, you gain the ability to choose, not to eliminate it. That is impossible, but to work with it consciously rather than being unconsciously driven by it. Imagine a person who understands that their empathy serves their ego. They do not pretend otherwise. They do not tell themselves stories about their own selflessness. When they help someone, they are aware of the multiple layers of motivation. Yes, they genuinely care. Yes, they want to ease suffering. But yes, they also enjoy feeling helpful. Yes, they also like the identity of being a caring person. Yes, they also appreciate the gratitude they receive. All of these things are true simultaneously, and they do not try to hide from any of them. This person is more dangerous than the unconscious empath. Not dangerous in the sense of harmful, but dangerous in the sense of powerful, because they understand the game. They see the masks, including their own. They know how empathy can be used, how vulnerability can be weaponized, how care can create control. And with that knowledge, they can choose how to play. They can offer help that truly empowers rather than creating dependency. They can receive care without manipulating for it. They can navigate the complex dance of human relationships with awareness rather than blind instinct. But here is where it gets truly interesting. Here is where we must look even deeper, past the individual ego, past the personal masks, to the larger patterns that govern human behavior. Because the ego does not exist in isolation. It is shaped by culture, by society, by the collective stories we tell about what it means to be good, to be worthy, to be lovable. And empathy, that supposedly universal human capacity, is actually highly culturally constructed. What counts as empathy? Who deserves it? How it should be expressed? All of these are learned, taught, enforced by the social systems we inhabit. In some cultures, empathy means feeling with someone, sharing their emotional state, crying when they cry, celebrating when they celebrate. In others, empathy means understanding someone's position without necessarily sharing their feelings, maintaining enough distance to be helpful rather than overwhelmed. In some contexts, empathy is shown through words, through explicit expressions of care and concern. In others, it is shown through actions, through practical help, through presence without commentary. The ego learns which version of empathy will be rewarded in its particular environment, and it performs accordingly. This means that even our most intimate feelings, our most personal expressions of care, are shaped by forces larger than ourselves. The ego is not just constructing a personal identity. It is constructing a socially acceptable identity. It is learning to be the kind of person who gets approval, who fits in, who is valued by their community. And empathy, being one of the most highly valued traits in most human societies, becomes a prime target for this construction. Think about how children learn empathy. Not just the natural capacity for emotional resonance, which appears quite early, but the performance of empathy, the social display of care. They learn by watching adults. They learn what gets praised and what gets ignored. They learn that certain expressions of empathy are rewarded while others are dismissed or even punished. A child who cries at another child's pain might be comforted and praised for their sensitivity. Or they might be told to toughen up, to not be so emotional, to control themselves. The same behavior, interpreted differently depending on the child's gender, their culture, their family's values. And so the ego learns. It learns which mask of empathy to wear. It learns how to perform care in ways that will be recognized and valued. It learns to hide the aspects of itself that do not fit the approved narrative. A boy learns to show empathy through action rather than emotion, to help rather than to feel, to solve rather than to share. A girl learns to be emotionally available, to nurture, to put others' needs before her own. These are generalizations, of course, and they vary widely across cultures and individuals. But the pattern is clear. Empathy is not just a natural capacity. It is a trained performance, shaped by social expectations, deployed strategically to maintain social position. This brings us to a darker territory. If empathy is performed, if it serves the ego, if it is shaped by social forces, then it can also be withheld, strategically, deliberately, as a form of power and control. The absence of empathy can be just as calculated as its presence, and sometimes more effective. Consider the person who knows exactly when to withhold their care. They have been empathetic, supportive, present. You have come to rely on their understanding, their compassion, their ability to see you and validate you. And then, suddenly, they withdraw. Not dramatically, not with explanation. They simply become unavailable. Their warmth cools. Their attention shifts. The empathy you had come to expect, to need, is no longer offered. And you are left scrambling, wondering what you did wrong, how you can earn back their care, what you must do to return to their good graces. This is empathy as weapon, the withdrawal of care as punishment, the conditional nature of compassion revealed. And it is devastatingly effective because it operates on the deepest human need, the need to be seen, to be understood, to matter to someone else. When that is given and then taken away, when empathy is shown to be conditional rather than constant, it creates a powerful form of control. The person who can give or withhold empathy at will holds enormous power over those who need it from them. And we all need it. That is the terrible truth. We are social creatures. We are built for connection. We require, at a fundamental biological level, the recognition and care of others. Infants who are not held, not responded to, not shown empathy, fail to thrive. They can die from lack of care even when their physical needs are met. This need does not disappear as we age. It simply becomes more complex, more hidden, more denied. But it remains. And those who understand this, who see how desperately we need empathy, can use that need against us. The manipulator does not lack empathy. That is a common misconception. The skilled manipulator has excellent empathy. They can read emotions, understand motivations, predict responses. They know exactly what you need to hear, what will comfort you, what will make you feel seen and understood. They use empathy as a tool, as a means of gathering information and creating bonds that serve their purposes. They perform care with perfect precision, not because they feel it, but because they understand its power. Or perhaps, and this is more disturbing, they do feel it. Perhaps the manipulator experiences genuine empathy, genuine care, genuine connection, but they have learned to use those feelings strategically. They have learned that caring for someone gives you access to them, influence over them, the ability to shape their choices and their sense of self. They have learned that empathy is not just a feeling but a form of power, and they wield it consciously, deliberately, with full awareness of its effects. This is the territory of the sociopath, we say, the narcissist, the abuser. We create categories, diagnoses, labels that allow us to separate these people from ourselves. They are different. They are broken. They lack something essential that we possess. But what if the difference is not in kind but in degree? What if we all use empathy strategically, all perform care for ego's purposes, all manipulate through compassion, but most of us do it unconsciously, automatically, without seeing what we are doing? And what if some people simply see it more clearly, do it more deliberately, take it further than social norms allow? This is not to excuse abuse. This is not to say that all empathy is manipulation or that genuine care does not exist. But it is to suggest that the line between healthy empathy and manipulative empathy is not as clear as we would like to believe. It is to suggest that we all exist on a spectrum, all use care as a tool, all have the capacity for both genuine connection and strategic performance. The question is not whether we do this, but how consciously we do it, how far we take it, and what limits we place on ourselves. The person who is aware of empathy's power has a choice. They can use that awareness to manipulate more effectively, to control others, to serve only their own ego's needs. Or they can use that awareness to be more genuinely helpful, to offer care that empowers rather than creates dependency, to see and interrupt their own manipulative patterns. The awareness itself is neutral. It is a tool. What matters is how it is used. But here is the paradox. The more aware you become of the ego's involvement in empathy, the harder it becomes to feel empathy spontaneously. When you see the mechanisms, when you understand the performance, when you catch yourself in the act of strategic caring, something in the experience changes. It becomes self-conscious. It loses its flow, its naturalness, its feeling of authenticity. You become like an actor who has become too aware of their technique, who can no longer lose themselves in a role because they are too busy watching themselves perform it. This is the cost of seeing behind the mask. You cannot unsee it. You cannot return to the innocent belief in your own pure motivations. You cannot feel simply good about yourself anymore because you see all the complexity, all the ego involvement, all the ways your care serves yourself as much as it serves others. And this can lead to a kind of paralysis, a cynicism, a withdrawal from connection because it all seems tainted, false, impossible to do cleanly. But there is another possibility, a way through this paralysis. It requires accepting something that feels almost impossible to accept. It requires holding two contradictory truths simultaneously without trying to resolve them into a single, simple answer. The first truth is that empathy always serves the ego. Always. There is no pure selflessness. There is no care that does not also feed the self. The second truth is that empathy is still real. The care is still genuine. The connection is still meaningful. Both things are true. The ego's involvement does not negate the reality of the feeling. The strategic element does not erase the authentic element. They coexist, intertwined, inseparable. This is what we might call mature empathy, not the innocent empathy of the child who has not yet learned to see themselves, not the cynical withdrawal of the person who has seen too much and decided connection is impossible, but the complex, aware, paradoxical empathy of the person who sees the ego at work and chooses to care anyway, who understands a performance and performs it anyway, who knows they are wearing a mask and wears it anyway, because the mask is also their face, because the performance is also authentic, because there is no pure, unmasked self waiting underneath. This person can help others without needing to believe they are purely selfless. They can receive help without shame about their need for it. They can navigate relationships with awareness of the power dynamics, the ego needs, the strategic elements, and still choose connection, still choose care, still choose to show up for others, and allow others to show up for them. They do not pretend to transcend the ego. They work with it, consciously, deliberately, with full awareness of its presence and its needs. And paradoxically, this aware empathy can be more genuinely helpful than unconscious empathy. Because when you see your own ego's need to be needed, you can catch yourself before you create dependency. When you understand your own desire to be seen as good, you can question whether your help is actually serving the other person or just serving your self-image. When you recognize the performance, you can choose to perform in ways that empower rather than control, that liberate rather than bind, that serve connection rather than ego maintenance. But this requires constant vigilance, constant self-examination, constant willingness to see yourself clearly, even when what you see is uncomfortable. It requires giving up the simple pleasure of feeling purely good about yourself. It requires accepting that you are always, in some way, serving yourself, even in your most generous moments. And it requires doing it anyway, choosing care anyway, showing up anyway, not because you are selfless, but because you understand that connection, even imperfect connection, even ego-involved connection, is better than isolation. Now let us turn to a specific example. Let us watch this dynamic play out in a concrete situation. Imagine two people. We will call them A and B. A is going through a difficult time. A relationship has ended, or a job has been lost, or a loved one has died. The details do not matter. What matters is that A is in pain, is vulnerable, is in need of support. B is A's friend. B cares about A. B wants to help. This is genuine. B is not consciously manipulating. B's concern is real. B reaches out, sends a message, calls, shows up at A's door. B asks how A is doing, offers to listen, suggests getting together. A, grateful for the attention, for the care, accepts. They meet. They talk. A shares their pain, their confusion, their fear. B listens, nods, offers comfort, says the right things, validates A's feelings, assures her that what they are feeling is normal, is understandable, is okay. A feels better, feels seen, feels less alone. B feels good about being there, about being helpful, about being the kind of friend who shows up in hard times. So far, this seems straightforward. This seems like simple, healthy friendship, empathy in action, connection in its purest form. But let us look more closely. Let us slow down the scene and examine what is happening beneath the surface, in the minds and egos of both people. A is in pain, real pain, but A is also aware, at some level, of how they are presenting that pain. A chooses which details to share with B. A calibrates their emotional display, not consciously, not manipulatively, but automatically, based on years of learning about what is acceptable to share, what will be met with support versus judgment, what will keep B engaged versus overwhelm B and drive them away. A is performing their vulnerability, even as they are genuinely vulnerable. The performance and the reality are the same thing. And what is it getting from this interaction? Yes, comfort. Yes, support. Yes, the relief of sharing burden. But also attention, confirmation that they matter to be, evidence that they are worthy of care. The ego, even in pain, is being fed. A's sense of self, which has been damaged by whatever loss they are experiencing, is being rebuilt through B's care. B's empathy is not just soothing A's pain. It is confirming A's existence, A's value, A's place in B's life and in the world. Now look at B. B is listening, caring, supporting. This is genuine. B feels A's pain, resonates with it, wants to ease it. But B is also aware of themselves in this role. B is the helper, the supporter, the good friend. B is performing this role, even as they genuinely inhabit it. And B is getting something from it. The satisfaction of being needed, the confirmation of being a good person, the strengthening of their identity as someone who is there for others. B's ego is being fed just as surely as A's is. But there is more. B is also, perhaps unconsciously, managing the interaction to maintain their own comfort. When A's pain becomes too intense, too raw, too much, B subtly redirects, offers a tissue, suggests a walk, changes the subject slightly. B tells themselves this is for A's benefit, to give A break from the intensity. And perhaps it is. But it is also for B's benefit, to keep B from being overwhelmed, to maintain B's sense of control, to ensure that B can continue to play the helper role without being pulled into the chaos of A's experience. And here is where it gets interesting. A senses this, not consciously, but at some level. A feels the limits of B's empathy, feels the places where B pulls back, redirects, maintains distance, and A adjusts. A learns how much pain B can handle. A learns to present their suffering in doses that B can manage. A learns to perform their vulnerability in ways that keep B engaged without overwhelming B. And in this mutual adjustment, in this dance of showing and hiding, of caring and protecting, a pattern is established. A becomes the one who needs. B becomes the one who helps. These roles solidify. They become part of how A and B understand themselves and each other. And once the roles are established, they become difficult to change. A may start to feel that they can only be close to B when they are in need, that B is only interested in them when they have problems to solve. B may start to feel that A is always in crisis, always needing support, never quite getting better. Both may feel trapped in a dynamic that no longer serves either of them, but neither knows how to change it because the dynamic is built into their identities, into their egos, into the story they tell about their friendship. This is how empathy can create dysfunction, not through cruelty or manipulation, but through the unconscious patterns that emerge when two egos interact, each seeking confirmation, each performing their role, each getting something they need from the dynamic even as the dynamic becomes limiting, confining, ultimately harmful. And the tragedy is that both people may be acting with genuine care, genuine good intentions, genuine desire for connection, but the ego's involvement, unexamined and unconscious, shapes the interaction in ways that serve ego maintenance rather than genuine growth or healing. Now imagine a different scenario. Same situation. A is in pain. B wants to help. But this time, B has awareness. B sees their own ego at work. B notices the satisfaction they feel at being needed, the way they are constructing their identity as a helper, the subtle ways they are managing the interaction to maintain their own comfort. B does not judge these things, does not try to eliminate them, but sees them. And in seeing them, B gains the ability to choose differently. B can offer help that does not create dependency. B can listen without needing to fix. B can be present with A's pain without needing to redirect it or manage it or make it comfortable. B can allow A to be messy, to be angry, to be inconsolable, without taking it personally or feeling like they are failing in their helper role. B can see when their help is actually serving their own ego more than it is serving A, and can pull back, can offer something different, can admit the limits of what they can provide. And A, sensing this different quality of presence, this lack of agenda, this absence of the subtle pressure to perform vulnerability in a certain way, can be more genuinely themselves, can show the parts of their pain that are not pretty or sympathetic, can be angry or bitter or shut down without fear of losing B's care, can move through their process at their own pace rather than at the pace that maintains B's comfort, can eventually move beyond the crisis without feeling like they're losing their connection to B, because the connection was never dependent on A being in need. This is what aware empathy looks like in practice. It is not perfect. It is not pure. The ego is still present, still operating, still seeking confirmation. But it is seen. And in being seen, it has less power to shape the interaction unconsciously. The masks are still worn, but they are worn with awareness, with choice, with the ability to take them off or change them as the situation requires. But achieving this level of awareness is difficult. It requires looking at parts of yourself that you would rather not see. It requires admitting that your care is not pure, that your help serves you, that your empathy is always, in some way, about you. And this admission can feel like a betrayal of everything you believe about yourself, everything you have built your identity on, everything that makes you feel like a good person. This is why most people resist this knowledge. This is why, when confronted with the idea that empathy serves ego, they react with defensiveness, with denial, with anger. Because to accept it feels like accepting that they are selfish, manipulative, fake. It feels like losing the one thing they could feel purely good about. It feels like descending into cynicism, into a world where nothing is genuine and everyone is just using everyone else. But this is not what the knowledge requires. The knowledge does not require cynicism. It requires complexity. It requires the ability to hold paradox. It requires understanding that you can be both genuine and strategic, both caring and self-serving, both authentic and performing. That these are not opposites, but aspects of the same reality, woven together so tightly that trying to separate them is futile and unnecessary. The goal is not to eliminate ego from empathy. That is impossible. The goal is to see it, to understand it, to work with it consciously, to know that when you help someone, you are also helping yourself. To know that when you care, you are also confirming your identity as a caring person. To know that when you connect, you are also feeding your ego's need for connection. And to do it anyway. To choose care, choose connection, choose empathy. Not because you are selfless, but because you understand that this is how humans work. This is how relationships function. This is the only way we have to be together in this world. And there's a strange freedom in this acceptance. When you stop trying to be purely good, when you stop trying to transcend ego, when you stop judging yourself for the ways your care serves you, you can actually be more present, more genuine, more helpful, because you are not using energy to maintain an illusion. You are not defending against the truth of your own complexity. You are simply being human, with all the messiness and contradiction that entails. Let us go deeper still. Let us examine the cultural narratives that make this so difficult to see and accept. We live in a culture that valorizes selflessness, that treats empathy as a pure virtue, that divides people into the caring and the selfish, the empathetic and the narcissistic, the good and the bad. These categories are taught to us from childhood. We learn that good people care about others, that bad people only care about themselves. We learn that empathy is evidence of moral worth, that lack of empathy is evidence of moral failure. We learn to judge ourselves and others based on this simple binary. But this binary is a lie. Or rather, it is a useful fiction, a social tool for encouraging pro-social behavior, but it does not reflect the reality of how humans actually work. No one is purely selfless. No one is purely selfish. We all exist in the complex middle ground, where care and self-interest intertwine, where empathy serves both others and ourselves, where the masks we wear are also our faces. The culture's insistence on the purity of empathy serves a purpose. It encourages people to help each other, to build communities, to create social bonds. But it also creates shame. Shame about the ways our care is not pure. Shame about the ego's involvement in our empathy. Shame about the strategic elements of our compassion. And this shame drives the ego underground, makes it operate unconsciously, prevents us from seeing and working with it directly. If we could accept culturally that empathy always serves ego, that care is always in some way self-interested, that there is no pure selflessness, we could have more honest conversations about relationships, about help, about connection. We could acknowledge the power dynamics inherent in caring relationships. We could talk about the ways empathy can be used to control, to manipulate, to maintain social hierarchies. We could develop more sophisticated understandings of what healthy relationships look like, understandings that account for ego needs rather than pretending they do not exist. But this would require a massive shift in how we think about morality, about goodness, about what it means to be a decent human being. It would require giving up the comforting simplicity of the good person versus bad person narrative. It would require accepting that we are all, always, operating from mixed motives, that our best actions contain elements of self-interest, that our care is never pure. And most people are not ready for that. Most people need to believe in their own goodness, need to believe that their empathy is pure, need to maintain the illusion of selflessness in order to feel okay about themselves. And perhaps that is okay. Perhaps most people do not need this level of awareness. Perhaps they can live perfectly good lives, have perfectly functional relationships, help others effectively, all while maintaining the illusion of pure empathy. Perhaps this knowledge is only useful for those who are already questioning, already seeing the cracks in the narrative, already feeling the dissonance between what they are told about empathy and what they experience in their actual relationships. If you are reading this, if you have stayed with this exploration this far, you are probably one of those people. You have probably already sensed that something is not quite right with the standard narrative about empathy. You have probably already caught glimpses of your own ego at work in your care for others. You have probably already felt the discomfort of seeing your own mixed motives, your own strategic caring, your own performance of compassion. And you are probably looking for a way to make sense of this, to integrate this knowledge, to figure out how to move forward with awareness rather than denial. So let us talk about what to do with this knowledge, how to live with the awareness that empathy serves ego, how to maintain relationships when you see the masks, including your own, how to care for others when you understand that your care is never pure. This is not a simple prescription. There's no 5-step program for enlightened empathy, but there are some principles, some practices, some ways of being that can help. First, practice seeing your ego without judging it. When you catch yourself feeling good about being helpful, do not shame yourself for it. Simply notice it. Ah, there's my ego, enjoying being needed. When you catch yourself performing empathy, do not condemn yourself as fake. Simply observe. Interesting. I am aware of how I am presenting myself right now. When you catch yourself using care to maintain control, do not spiral into self-hatred. Just see it. This is what I am doing. This is how my ego is operating. The seeing itself, without judgment, begins to create space between you and your ego's automatic patterns. Second, practice honesty about your limits. You do not have to be endlessly available. You do not have to help everyone. You do not have to be the person who always has empathy to spare. When you are aware that your empathy serves your ego, you can also see when that service is costing you too much, when the ego's need to be needed is driving you to help in ways that deplete you, that create resentment, that are not sustainable. You can say no. You can set boundaries. You can admit that you do not have the capacity to be what someone needs. And you can do this without guilt, because you understand that your care, while genuine, is also limited, is also human, is also allowed to have edges and endpoints. Third, practice empowering rather than rescuing. When you see your egos need to be needed, you can catch yourself before you create dependency. You can ask yourself, is my help actually helping this person grow and become more capable? Or is it keeping them in a position where they need me? Am I offering support that leads to independence? Or am I offering support that maintains their reliance on me? This is a subtle distinction, and it requires constant attention, but it is crucial. The goal is not to stop helping. The goal is to help in ways that ultimately make your help unnecessary. Fourth, practice receiving as well as giving. If your ego is built around being the helper, the strong one, the one who has it together, then allowing yourself to be helped, to be vulnerable, to need others, will feel threatening. But it is necessary, because relationships cannot be healthy when they are one-directional, when one person is always the giver and the other always the receiver. You must be willing to let others see your struggles, your weaknesses, your needs. You must be willing to let them help you, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it threatens your identity as the capable one. This balances the power dynamic, creates reciprocity, allows for genuine mutuality rather than the helper-help pattern that so often develops. Fifth, practice transparency about the performance. This is advanced, and it will not work in all relationships, but with people who can handle it, with people who are also aware. You can sometimes name what you are doing. You can say, I notice I am performing empathy right now. I notice I am enjoying being the one you come to for support. I notice I am getting something from this dynamic. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you bring the unconscious into consciousness. You make the implicit explicit. You invite the other person to see the masks with you rather than pretending they are not there. This level of honesty can create profound intimacy, or it can destroy relationships that depend on the illusion. Use it carefully. Sixth, practice accepting that you will fail. You will slip back into unconscious patterns. You will use empathy manipulatively. You will create dependencies. You will perform care in ways that serve your ego more than they serve others. You will wear masks without realizing it. This is inevitable. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness, and awareness is not a permanent state. It comes and goes. You see clearly for a moment, then you forget, then you remember again. This is the process. Be patient with it. Be patient with yourself. Now, let us consider the implications of all this for power and social dynamics. Because empathy is not just a personal, individual phenomenon. It is also a social tool, a mechanism through which power is exercised and maintained. Those who control empathy, who decide who deserves it and who does not, who can give it or withhold it strategically, hold significant power in social systems. Think about how empathy is distributed in society. Who gets empathy and who does not? Whose suffering is recognized and validated, and whose is ignored or dismissed? These are not random patterns. They reflect and reinforce existing power structures. People in positions of power, people who fit dominant social categories, people who are seen as valuable and important, receive more empathy. Their pain is taken seriously. Their needs are prioritized. Their perspectives are centered. Meanwhile, people who are marginalized, who are seen as less valuable, who do not fit dominant categories, receive less empathy. Their pain is minimized. Their needs are ignored. Their perspectives are dismissed. And this distribution of empathy is not just about individual prejudice or personal failing. It is built into the structure of how we are taught to see and value different kinds of people. We learn, often unconsciously, whose humanity to recognize and whose to overlook. We learn which kinds of suffering deserve our attention and which we can ignore. We learn to empathize easily with people who are like us, who share our experiences and perspectives, and to struggle to empathize with people who are different, whose experiences we cannot easily imagine or relate to. This means that empathy, far from being a universal solvent that dissolves social divisions, can actually reinforce them. We empathize with our own group. We care about people like us. We extend compassion to those we see as deserving, as innocent, as worthy. And we withhold empathy from those we see as other, as threatening, as undeserving. The ego is not just individual, It is also collective. We build our sense of self not just as individuals, but as members of groups, and we use empathy to maintain group boundaries, to reinforce in-group cohesion, to justify out-group exclusion. Consider how this plays out in political contexts. Each side sees themselves as empathetic, as caring, as concerned with justice and human welfare. And each side sees the other as lacking empathy, as cruel, as indifferent to suffering. But what is actually happening is that each side has empathy for different people, for different kinds of suffering, for different visions of what matters. The conservative empathizes with the business owner struggling under regulations, with the traditional family, feeling their values are under attack, with the person who feels their country is being taken from them. The progressive empathizes with the marginalized person facing discrimination, with the poor person struggling in an unjust system, with the planet suffering under exploitation. Both are empathy. Both are genuine. But they are directed at different objects, based on different values, serving different visions of how society should be organized. And each side uses their empathy as a weapon against the other. Look at how cruel they are, how indifferent to suffering, how lacking in basic human compassion. This is not just rhetoric. This is genuine feeling. Each side genuinely cannot understand how the other side can be so callous, so blind, so heartless, because each side is empathizing with different people, and from their perspective, the other side's empathy is directed at the wrong targets, is wasted on the undeserving, is actually causing harm to those who truly need care. This is empathy as tribal marker, empathy as political tool, empathy as mechanism of social division rather than social cohesion. And it is incredibly powerful because it feels so righteous, so obviously correct, so morally unassailable. How can caring about suffering be wrong? How can empathy be criticized? But when empathy is selective, when it is used to reinforce group boundaries, when it serves to justify harm to those outside the circle of care, it becomes not a virtue, but a weapon. The ego, operating at the collective level, uses empathy to maintain group identity, to create solidarity, to mobilize action against perceived threats. And this is not necessarily bad. Groups need cohesion. Movements need solidarity. Change requires collective action. But when we are unconscious of this dynamic, when we believe our empathy is universal and pure rather than selective and strategic, we become blind to the ways we are excluding, dismissing, dehumanizing those outside our circle of care. So, what does aware empathy look like at the social level? It looks like recognizing that your empathy is limited, is shaped by your position and perspective, is not the only valid form of empathy. It looks like being curious about who you do not naturally empathize with and why. It looks like questioning the boundaries of your care, the limits of your compassion, the people and perspectives you automatically dismiss or overlook. It looks like practicing empathy as a skill, as something you can extend beyond your natural inclinations, rather than just a feeling that arises automatically for some people and not others. But this is difficult. It requires empathizing with people you do not like, people whose values you oppose, people who you believe are causing harm. It requires seeing their humanity even when you are fighting against their actions. It requires holding the complexity that someone can be both a person deserving of empathy and someone whose behavior must be opposed. It requires giving up the simple narrative of good people versus bad people, of the empathetic versus the cruel, and accepting that everyone is human. Everyone has reasons for what they do. Everyone is operating from their own ego's needs and their own limited perspective. This does not mean accepting harm. This does not mean tolerating injustice. This does not mean abandoning your values or your commitments. But it means fighting with awareness rather than righteousness, with complexity rather than certainty, with recognition of shared humanity rather than dehumanization of the enemy. And this is much harder than fighting with the fuel of moral outrage, with the certainty that you are purely good and they are purely bad, with the simplicity of us versus them. Let us return now to the individual level, to the intimate relationships where empathy plays out daily. Let us talk about romantic relationships, where the dynamics of empathy and ego become particularly intense and particularly revealing. Because in romantic relationships, we are more vulnerable, more exposed, more dependent on another person's care than in almost any other context. And this vulnerability creates both the possibility for profound connection and the possibility for profound manipulation. In the beginning of a romantic relationship, empathy flows easily. You are fascinated by this other person. You want to understand them, to know them, to see them fully. You listen with rapt attention to their stories. You notice their moods, their needs, their preferences. You adjust yourself to accommodate them. You show care in 1,000 small ways, and they do the same for you. This mutual empathy, this reciprocal care, creates the feeling of falling in love, of being seen and understood in a way you have never been before. But underneath this beautiful dance, the egos are at work. You are not just learning about them. You are also constructing an identity as someone who is good at relationships, who is caring and attentive and emotionally intelligent. You are not just caring for them. You are also confirming to yourself that you are lovable, that you are chosen, that you are special to someone. You are not just being vulnerable. You are also testing whether they will accept you, whether your vulnerability will be met with care or rejection, whether you can trust them with your true self. And they're doing the same. Both of you are performing, testing, constructing identities, feeding your egos, all while genuinely caring, genuinely connecting, genuinely falling in love. The performance and the reality are inseparable. The strategic and the authentic are the same thing. And in the beginning, when everything is new and exciting and full of possibility, this works beautifully. The egos are aligned. Both people are getting what they need. The care flows both ways. The vulnerability is reciprocated. The masks fit comfortably. But over time, patterns emerge. Roles solidify. One person becomes the more empathetic one, the more emotionally available one, the one who does more of the emotional labor in the relationship. The other becomes the more defended one, the more independent one, the one who receives more care than they give. This is not usually a conscious choice. It emerges from the interaction of two egos, each seeking their own form of confirmation, each playing the role that feels most natural, most comfortable, most aligned with their existing identity. And once these roles are established, they become difficult to change. The empathetic partner's ego is built around being caring, being needed, being the one who understands and supports. To stop playing this role would threaten their identity, would make them feel selfish, would create anxiety about the relationship's stability. The defended partner's ego is built around being independent, being strong, being the one who does not need too much. To become more vulnerable, more needy, more emotionally expressive would threaten their identity, would make them feel weak, would create anxiety about being too much, about being rejected. So the pattern continues. The empathetic partner gives more and more, trying to earn the defended partner's vulnerability, trying to prove their worth through care, trying to maintain the relationship through sheer force of empathy. The defended partner receives this care, but cannot quite reciprocate, cannot quite open up, cannot quite meet the empathetic partner's needs, because doing so would require changing their role, threatening their identity, admitting needs they have learned to hide, and both partners become increasingly unhappy. The empathetic partner feels depleted, resentful, taken for granted. They are giving so much and receiving so little. They are doing all the emotional work. They are the only one trying. But they cannot stop, because stopping would mean admitting that their empathy has not been enough, that their care has not earned them the love they need, that their entire strategy for maintaining relationships has failed. The defended partner feels pressured, guilty, inadequate. They know they are not meeting their partner's needs. They know they should be more open, more vulnerable, more emotionally available. But they cannot, because doing so feels like losing themselves, like becoming someone they are not, like surrendering the independence that has always protected them. This is the empathy trap in romantic relationships. Both people are acting from genuine feeling. Both people care. Both people want the relationship to work. But the ego patterns, the roles, the unconscious strategies for getting needs met, create a dynamic that serves neither person, that creates suffering for both, that slowly erodes the connection they are both trying to maintain. And the tragedy is that more empathy does not solve this. The empathetic partner trying harder, caring more, giving more, only deepens the pattern, only reinforces the roles, only makes the trap more inescapable. What would solve it is awareness. Both partners seeing their own ego patterns. The empathetic partner recognizing that their care is also a strategy for control, a way of trying to earn love, a performance of their identity as the caring one. The defended partner recognizing that their independence is also a defense, a way of avoiding vulnerability, a performance of their identity as the strong one. Both partners seeing the masks they are wearing, the roles they are playing, the ways their egos are shaping the relationship unconsciously. And then, with that awareness, choosing differently, the empathetic partner learning to pull back, to stop overfunctioning, to allow space for the defended partner to step forward, learning that less empathy, less care, less emotional labor might actually serve the relationship better than more, learning to attend to their own needs rather than constantly attending to their partners, learning that their worth is not determined by how much they give, that they are lovable even when they are not being endlessly caring. The defended partner learning to step forward, to risk vulnerability, to express needs and feelings even when it feels uncomfortable, learning that showing weakness does not mean losing themselves, that needing someone does not make them pathetic, that emotional expression is not the same as emotional collapse, learning that their worth is not determined by their independence, that they are lovable even when they are needy, even when they are struggling, even when they are not perfectly in control. This is incredibly difficult. It requires both partners to act against their ego's strongest impulses, to threaten their own identities, to risk the relationship's stability in service of its long-term health. Most couples cannot do this without help, without therapy, without some external perspective that can see the patterns they are trapped in and help them find a way out. And many couples never do it at all. They either stay in the dysfunctional pattern, slowly growing more resentful and disconnected, or they break up, each person blaming the other for the failure, each person taking their ego patterns into the next relationship, where they will play out again with a different partner. But for those who can do it, for those who can see their egos at work and choose to act differently, the reward is profound. A relationship where both partners can be both strong and vulnerable, both independent and dependent, both giving and receiving. A relationship where empathy flows both ways, where care is reciprocal, where neither person is trapped in a fixed role. A relationship where the masks can be worn lightly, can be taken off and put back on, can be seen and acknowledged rather than unconsciously performed. A relationship where both people can be fully human, with all the complexity and contradiction that entails. This is mature love, not the intoxicating empathy of the beginning, when everything is new and both egos are perfectly aligned. Not the comfortable companionship of long-term relationships that have settled into fixed patterns, but the conscious, aware, paradoxical love of two people who see each other's egos, who understand the masks, who know that their care is never pure and their connection is never simple, and who choose each other anyway, who choose to keep showing up, keep caring, keep trying, not because they believe in some romantic ideal of perfect love, but because they understand that this messy, ego-involved, imperfect connection is the best that humans can do, and it is enough. Now let us talk about the ultimate question, the question that has been hovering at the edges of this entire exploration. If empathy always serves ego, if care is never pure, if we are always wearing masks, then what is the point? Why bother with relationships at all? Why not just accept that we are all fundamentally alone, trapped in our own egos, unable to truly connect with anyone else? Why not embrace isolation, cynicism, the cold comfort of seeing through all illusions? This is the temptation of awareness. When you see the mechanisms, when you understand the performance, when you recognize the ego's involvement in everything, it can feel like nothing is real, nothing is genuine, nothing is worth doing. This is the dark night of the soul that comes with this knowledge. The moment when you have seen too much and cannot go back to innocent belief, but have not yet found a way to move forward with awareness. But here is the thing. The fact that empathy serves ego does not make it less real. The fact that care is strategic does not make it less genuine. The fact that we are performing does not make the performance less meaningful. This is the paradox that must be accepted. The ego's involvement does not negate the reality of connection. The masks do not erase the face underneath. The strategic element does not eliminate the authentic element. They coexist. They are inseparable. They are both true. You are always serving your ego. And you are also capable of genuine care. You are always performing. And you are also being authentic. You are always wearing masks. And you are also showing your true self. These are not contradictions. They are the complex reality of human consciousness, of social existence, of what it means to be a self in relation to other selves. The point is not to transcend this. The point is to accept it, to work with it, to see it clearly, and choose connection anyway. Not because you believe connection is pure or perfect or free from ego, but because you understand that connection, even imperfect connection, even ego-involved connection, is better than isolation. Because you understand that we are social creatures, that we need each other, that the ego itself only exists in relation to others and cannot survive alone. Isolation is not freedom from ego. It is ego's death. The self cannot maintain itself without others to reflect it back, to confirm it, to interact with it. The hermit in the cave, cut off from all human contact, does not transcend ego. They lose the sense of self entirely, or they maintain it only through memory, through imagined conversations, through the internalized voices of others who are no longer present. The ego needs relationship. It needs connection. It needs empathy, both given and received, not as a weakness, but as a fundamental requirement of its existence. So we connect. We care. We empathize. Not because we are selfless, but because we are selves, and selves require others. We wear masks, not to deceive, but because the mask is how we interface with the world, how we make ourselves comprehensible to others, how we navigate the complex social reality we inhabit. We perform, not because we are fake, but because performance is how we communicate, how we express, how we create shared meaning with others. And the beautiful thing, the redemptive thing, the thing that makes all of this bearable, is that when two people both understand this, when both people see the egos at work, when both people recognize the masks, they can create a different kind of connection. Not the innocent connection of those who believe in pure empathy, not the cynical disconnection of those who have given up on genuine care, but the aware connection of those who see the complexity and choose each other anyway. This is intimacy, not the sharing of secrets, though that may be part of it, not the merging of identities, though that feeling may arise, but the mutual recognition of each other's humanity, each other's ego, each other's masks, the ability to see each other clearly, without illusion, without idealization, without the need to pretend that either of you is better or purer or more selfless than you actually are. The ability to say, I see you. I see your ego at work. I see the ways you are serving yourself even as you care for me. I see your masks. And I choose you anyway. And I trust you to see the same in me. And to choose me anyway. This is what makes you irresistible. Not the mask of empathy. Not the performance of care. Not the illusion of selflessness. But the willingness to be seen, fully, ego and all, masks and all, strategic and authentic and everything in between. The willingness to see others the same way. The willingness to connect in full awareness of the complexity, the contradiction, the impossibility of pure connection, and to do it anyway. Because here is the secret, the thing that the ego does not want you to know, the thing that threatens its entire operation. You are most attractive, most magnetic, most irresistible, not when you are performing perfectly, not when you are hiding your ego, not when you are pretending to be purely empathetic. You are most attractive when you are real, when you are complex, when you are contradictory, when you are both caring and self-interested, both authentic and performing, both masked and revealed. People are drawn to complexity, to depth, to the sense that there is more to discover, more to understand, more layers to peel back. The person who presents as purely good, purely empathetic, purely selfless, is actually boring. They are one-dimensional. They are predictable. They are safe, perhaps, but they are not interesting. They do not create the spark of curiosity, the desire to know more, the fascination that comes from sensing hidden depths. But the person who is visibly complex, who shows their contradictions, who admits their ego's involvement in their care, who wears their masks lightly and with awareness, who can be both vulnerable and strong, both giving and receiving, both authentic and strategic. This person is magnetic, because they are real, because they are human, because they reflect back the complexity that exists in everyone, and in doing so, they give others permission to be complex too, to stop performing perfection, to stop hiding their egos, to stop pretending to be purely good. This is the paradox of the mask. When you wear it unconsciously, when you believe it is your face, when you perform it perfectly, it actually distances you from others. It creates a barrier. It prevents genuine connection because you are not showing your full self. And others can sense this, can feel the performance, can detect the inauthenticity even if they cannot name it. But when you wear the mask consciously, when you know it is a mask, when you can acknowledge it and play with it and take it off when appropriate, it becomes a tool for connection rather than a barrier to it, because you are not hiding behind it. You are using it, and there is a profound difference. Think about the people you are most drawn to, the people you find most interesting, most attractive, most compelling. Chances are, they are not the people who seem perfect, who never show weakness, who are always empathetic and caring and good. Chances are, they are the people who are visibly complex, who show their contradictions, who can be caring and selfish, strong and vulnerable, confident and insecure, who do not try to hide their humanity but instead display it, own it, work with it consciously. These are the people who have integrated the knowledge we have been exploring, who understand that empathy serves ego and do it anyway, who know they are wearing masks and wear them with awareness, who see the performance and perform it consciously, who accept their own complexity and, in doing so, become more fully themselves, more fully human, more fully alive. This is what you can become, not by transcending ego, not by achieving pure empathy, not by removing your masks, but by seeing them, by understanding them, by working with them consciously, by accepting that you are complex, contradictory, both selfish and caring, both authentic and performing, both masked and real, by accepting that this is not a flaw to be fixed, but the fundamental nature of human consciousness, by accepting that everyone else is the same, that we are all in this together, all navigating the same impossible task of being selves in relation to other selves. And when you accept this, when you truly integrate this knowledge, something shifts. You stop trying so hard. You stop performing perfection. You stop hiding your ego. You stop pretending to be purely empathetic. And paradoxically, you become more empathetic, not because you are trying to be, but because you are no longer using energy to maintain illusions. You can actually see others more clearly because you are not so busy managing your own self-image. You can actually care more genuinely because you are not so invested in being seen as caring. You can actually connect more deeply because you are not so defended against being seen fully. This is the freedom that comes with awareness. Not freedom from ego, but freedom within ego. Not freedom from masks, but freedom to wear them consciously. Not freedom from performance, but freedom to perform with awareness of what you are doing and why. This is the liberation that this knowledge offers. Not the liberation of transcendence, but the liberation of acceptance. The liberation of seeing yourself clearly and choosing yourself anyway. The liberation of seeing others clearly and choosing them anyway. Let us bring this back to the practical, to the everyday moments where empathy plays out. You are with a friend who is upset. They are telling you about their problems. You feel the pull to comfort them, to offer advice, to fix their situation. And now, with awareness, you also feel your ego at work. You notice the satisfaction you get from being the helper. You notice the way you are constructing your identity as a good friend. You notice the subtle ways you are managing the interaction to maintain your own comfort. What do you do with this awareness? Do you stop helping? Do you withdraw your empathy? Do you confess to your friend that your care is not pure? No, you simply hold the awareness. You help them. You offer comfort. You listen, but you do it with full knowledge of what you are doing and why. You do it consciously rather than automatically. And this consciousness changes the quality of your help. You are less attached to a particular outcome. You are less invested in being seen as helpful. You are less likely to overfunction or create dependency. You can offer what you can offer and let go of what you cannot control. Or you are in a conflict with your partner. They are hurt by something you did. They are expressing their pain. You feel defensive. You want to explain yourself, to justify your actions, to make them see that you are not the bad person they're making you out to be. And now, with awareness, you also see your ego at work. You see how threatened it feels by their criticism. You see how desperately it wants to maintain its self-image as a good partner. You see the mask of the misunderstood victim that you are tempted to put on. What do you do with this awareness? Do you suppress your defensiveness? Do you force yourself to accept blame you do not feel? Do you perform empathy you do not feel? No. You acknowledge your defensiveness. You admit that you feel threatened. You say, I am having a hard time hearing this right now because I feel attacked. I know you are in pain and I want to understand, but I also feel defensive and I need a moment. This is honesty. This is awareness. This is working with your ego rather than being unconsciously driven by it or trying to transcend it. Or you are considering whether to help someone. They have asked for your support. You feel torn. Part of you wants to help. Part of you feels resentful, burdened, like you are already giving too much. And now, with awareness, you see both parts clearly. You see the ego that wants to be seen as helpful, that fears being judged as selfish if you say no. You see the ego that is depleted, that needs to protect itself, that is tired of always being the one who gives. What do you do with this awareness? You make a choice, not based on what you should do, not based on what a good person would do, but based on what you actually have capacity for, what will serve both you and the other person, what is sustainable rather than just immediately gratifying to your ego. Maybe you say yes, but with clear boundaries about what you can offer and what you cannot. Maybe you say no, with honesty about your limits rather than excuses or justifications. Maybe you say not now, but later, when I have more capacity. The awareness gives you options. It frees you from the automatic patterns, the unconscious drives, the ego's unexamined demands. This is what living with awareness looks like. Not dramatic, not transcendent, not perfect, just more conscious, more honest, more able to choose rather than being driven, more able to see yourself and others clearly, more able to work with reality as it is rather than as you wish it were. And over time, this awareness compounds. The more you see your ego at work, the more familiar you become with its patterns. The more you catch yourself performing, the more skilled you become at performing consciously. The more you notice your masks, the more easily you can take them off or change them as needed. You develop a kind of fluidity, a flexibility, an ability to move between different modes of being without getting stuck in any one of them. You can be empathetic when empathy is called for, without losing yourself in it. You can be defended when defense is necessary, without becoming rigid. You can be vulnerable when vulnerability serves connection, without collapsing into neediness. You can be strong when strength is required, without becoming inflexible. You can wear the mask of the helper, the mask of the vulnerable one, the mask of the strong one, the mask of the authentic one, and you can do it all consciously, knowing that these are masks, knowing that they are also real, knowing that the performance and the authenticity are inseparable. This is mastery, not mastery over others, not manipulation, not control, but mastery of yourself, mastery of your own ego, mastery of your own patterns, the ability to see yourself clearly and work with what you see rather than being unconsciously driven by it, the ability to choose your responses rather than being at the mercy of automatic reactions, the ability to be fully human, with all the complexity and contradiction that entails, without being overwhelmed by it or trying to deny it. And this mastery makes you powerful, not in the sense of power over others, though that may be a side effect, but in the sense of power over your own life, your own choices, your own relationships. You are no longer at the mercy of your ego's unconscious drives. You are no longer trapped in fixed patterns. You are no longer performing roles without awareness. You are awake. You are conscious. You are free, within the constraints of being human, to choose how you want to be, how you want to relate, how you want to live. But let us not pretend this is easy. Let us not pretend that awareness solves all problems, because it does not. In some ways, it creates new problems. It makes relationships more complicated. It removes the simple comfort of believing you are purely good. It introduces doubt, questioning, constant self-examination. It can make you feel isolated. because most people are not operating with this level of awareness, and trying to explain it to them can make you sound cynical, manipulative, cold. You will lose some relationships when you start seeing clearly. Some people will not be able to handle your honesty. Some people need you to play a certain role, and when you stop playing it, when you start showing your complexity, they will feel betrayed, confused, angry. Some people are invested in the illusion of pure empathy, and when you start talking about ego's involvement, they will see you as threatening that illusion, as attacking something sacred, as being needlessly negative, and you will question yourself. You will wonder if you have gone too far, if you are seeing things that are not there, if you are making everything too complicated. You will miss the simplicity of believing in your own goodness. You will miss the warm feeling of helping someone without any awareness of your ego's involvement. You will miss the innocence of connection before you understood the mechanisms. This is the price of awareness. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot return to innocent belief once you have looked behind the curtain. And sometimes, you will wish you could. Sometimes, you will wish you had never started this exploration, never questioned your empathy, never looked at your masks. Sometimes, ignorance will seem like it was bliss, and awareness will seem like a curse. But you cannot go back. And eventually, you will not want to. Because despite the complications, despite the loss of innocence, despite the difficulty, awareness offers something that ignorance cannot. It offers truth. It offers reality. It offers the possibility of genuine choice rather than unconscious compulsion. It offers the possibility of real intimacy rather than performed connection. It offers the possibility of being fully yourself rather than a collection of unconscious patterns and automatic responses. And there is a deep satisfaction in this. A satisfaction that is different from the warm glow of believing you are purely good, but perhaps more substantial, more lasting, more real. The satisfaction of seeing clearly. The satisfaction of understanding. The satisfaction of working with reality as it is rather than as you wish it were. The satisfaction of being awake rather than asleep. Conscious rather than automatic. Free rather than driven. This is what the journey offers. Not perfection. Not transcendence. Not the elimination of ego or the achievement of pure empathy. But awareness. Consciousness. The ability to see yourself and others clearly. The ability to work with the complexity rather than denying it. The ability to choose connection, choose care, choose empathy, with full knowledge of what you are doing and why, with full acceptance of the ego's involvement, with full recognition of the masks you are wearing. And in that choice, in that awareness, in that acceptance, you become more fully human, not less selfish, but more honestly selfish, not more empathetic, but more consciously empathetic. Not less masked, but more aware of your masks. And paradoxically, this makes you more capable of genuine connection, more capable of real care, more capable of authentic relationship. Because you are not using energy to maintain illusions. Because you are not defending against being seen. Because you are not performing unconsciously. Because you are simply being, with all your complexity, with all your contradiction, with all your humanity. Now, as we approach the end of this exploration, let us consider one final question. What is the relationship between empathy and power? We have touched on this throughout, but let us look at it directly. Because empathy is not just a feeling or a capacity. It is also a form of power. The ability to understand others, to predict their responses, to influence their emotions, to create bonds, to inspire loyalty, to manipulate behavior. This is power. And those who understand empathy deeply, who can deploy it strategically, who see its mechanisms clearly, have access to this power. This is why leaders cultivate empathy, why politicians learn to read crowds and respond to their emotions, why salespeople study how to create rapport and connection, why therapists train in understanding and reflecting feelings, why parents learn to attune to their children's needs. Empathy is a tool, a powerful tool. And like all tools, it can be used for good or ill, for liberation or control, for genuine connection or strategic manipulation. The person who understands empathy's relationship to ego, who sees the masks, who knows the mechanisms, has a choice about how to use this power. They can use it to manipulate, to control, to serve only their own interests. They can become the skilled narcissist, the charismatic abuser, the cult leader who uses empathy to create dependency and extract devotion. This is the dark path, the path of conscious manipulation, the path of using awareness as a weapon. Or they can use it to liberate, to empower, to serve genuine connection. They can become the skilled therapist, the conscious leader, the aware friend who uses empathy to help others see themselves clearly, to break free from unconscious patterns, to develop their own awareness and agency. This is the light path, the path of conscious care, the path of using awareness as a gift. But here is the thing. Both paths involve ego. Both paths serve the self. The manipulator's ego is fed by control, by power over others, by the satisfaction of getting what they want. The liberator's ego is fed by helping, by being seen as good, by the satisfaction of making a positive difference. Both are using empathy strategically. Both are aware of the mechanisms. Both are deploying care consciously. The difference is not in the presence or absence of ego, but in the values that guide how the ego is served, in the limits placed on what is acceptable, in the consideration given to others' well-being alongside one's own. This is the ethical dimension of aware empathy. When you see the power you have, when you understand the mechanisms, when you know how to use empathy strategically, you must choose what values will guide your use of that power. You must decide what kind of person you want to be, what kind of impact you want to have, what kind of world you want to create through your relationships and your choices. And this is not a one-time decision. It is a constant choice, made in every interaction, in every moment when you deploy empathy, in every situation where you have power over another person's emotions or choices. The temptation to manipulate is always present. The ego's desire for control, for getting what it wants, for serving itself without regard for others, is always there. And the only thing standing between you and that path is your values, your choices, your commitment to something beyond pure self-interest. This is where we must talk about ethics, about morality, about what it means to be good when you understand that goodness is not pure, that care serves ego, that empathy is strategic. Because the traditional framework of ethics, based on the idea of selfless action and pure motivation, does not work here. If all action serves ego, if all empathy is strategic, then the traditional distinction between selfish and selfless collapses. We need a different framework. Perhaps we can think of ethics not as the elimination of self-interest, but as the expansion of self-interest to include others. Not because we are selfless, but because we understand that our well-being is tied to others' well-being, that our ego needs connection and cannot thrive in isolation, that serving others is also serving ourselves in a deeper, more sustainable way than pure exploitation ever could. This is enlightened self-interest, the understanding that the best way to serve your ego is not to dominate others, not to extract from them, not to use them purely as means to your ends, but to create genuine connection, to contribute to their well-being, to build relationships based on reciprocity and mutual care. Not because you are selfless, but because you are smart. Because you understand that sustainable ego satisfaction comes from healthy relationships, from being valued and respected, from contributing to something larger than yourself. This is not pure altruism. This is strategic compassion. This is aware empathy deployed in service of long-term self-interest that includes others' interests. And perhaps this is the best we can do. Perhaps this is what ethics looks like when we accept that we cannot transcend ego, that we are always serving ourselves, that pure selflessness is an illusion. Perhaps this is enough, because the outcome is the same. Whether you help someone because you are purely selfless or because you understand that helping them serves your long-term interests, they are still helped. Whether you care for someone because you have transcended ego or because your ego is fed by caring, they still receive care. Whether you connect with someone because you are purely authentic or because you are consciously performing authenticity, the connection is still real. The motivation may be different, but the effect is the same. And perhaps the motivation does not matter as much as we think it does. Perhaps we have been too focused on purity of intention, on selflessness of motive, on the inner state of the person acting. Perhaps what matters more is the effect, the outcome, the impact on others and on the world. Perhaps a person who helps others for ego-driven reasons, but does it skillfully, sustainably, with awareness of the dynamics, is more valuable than a person who wants to be purely selfless, but burns out, creates dependencies, or helps ineffectively because they are unconscious of their own patterns. This is a pragmatic ethics, an ethics based on outcomes rather than intentions, an ethics that accepts human nature as it is rather than demanding that we be something we are not, an ethics that works with ego rather than trying to eliminate it. And perhaps this is more realistic, more sustainable, more honest than the traditional framework that demands selflessness while denying the reality of how humans actually work. But this requires a shift in how we think about ourselves and each other. It requires giving up the judgment of selfish versus selfless. It requires accepting that everyone is serving their ego, always, and that this is not a moral failing but a fact of human consciousness. It requires evaluating people not on whether they are selfish, but on how they are selfish, what values guide their self-interest, what consideration they give to others in the pursuit of their own needs. Some people serve their ego through domination, through extraction, through using others purely as means to their ends. Some people serve their ego through connection, through contribution, through creating value for others as a way of creating value for themselves. Both are selfish. Both are serving ego. But one creates suffering and the other creates well-being. One is destructive and the other is constructive. One we call bad and the other we call good. Not because of the presence or absence of self-interest, but because of the effects they create in the world. This is a more nuanced morality, a more complex ethics, a more realistic understanding of human behavior, and it is more forgiving in some ways, because it does not demand that we be angels. It does not require that we transcend our nature. It simply asks that we be conscious of our nature, that we work with it skillfully, that we choose to serve our ego in ways that also serve others, that create connection rather than destruction, that build rather than tear down. And this is possible. This is achievable. This is what aware empathy offers, not the transcendence of ego, but the conscious direction of ego toward constructive rather than destructive ends, not the elimination of self-interest, but the expansion of self-interest to include others, not the removal of masks, but the conscious wearing of masks in service of genuine connection, not purity but awareness, not perfection but choice. So where does this leave us? What is the conclusion of this exploration? What are we to do with this knowledge that empathy serves ego, that care is strategic, that we are always wearing masks? The answer is simple, though not easy. We accept it. We work with it. We choose connection anyway. We choose care anyway. We choose empathy anyway. Not because we believe it is pure, but because we understand it is necessary. Not because we think we are selfless, but because we know that serving others is also serving ourselves. Not because we have transcended ego, but because we have learned to work with ego consciously. We become aware. We see the mechanisms. We understand the patterns. We catch ourselves in the act of performing, of serving ego, of wearing masks. And we do it anyway. We do it consciously. We do it with choice. We do it with awareness of what we are doing and why. And in that awareness, in that consciousness, in that choice, we become more fully human, more fully ourselves, more fully alive. This is the gift of this knowledge. Not comfort, not simplicity, not the warm glow of believing you are purely good, but awareness, truth, reality, the ability to see clearly and choose consciously, the ability to work with yourself as you are rather than as you wish you were, the ability to connect with others in full recognition of the complexity, the contradiction, the impossibility of pure connection, and to do it anyway. And this makes you powerful. This makes you free. This makes you, paradoxically, more capable of genuine empathy, genuine care, genuine connection, because you are not using energy to maintain illusions, because you are not defending against being seen, because you are not performing unconsciously, because you are simply being, with full awareness, with full acceptance, with full recognition of your humanity and all its messy, contradictory, ego-involved glory. This is what it means to live under the mask, not to remove the mask, because the mask is also your face, not to transcend the performance, because the performance is also authentic, not to eliminate ego, because ego is the structure of consciousness itself. But to see it all clearly, to understand it all deeply, to work with it all consciously, to choose, in every moment, how you want to be, how you want to relate, how you want to live. And in that choice, in that awareness, in that acceptance, you become irresistible. Not because you are perfect, not because you are purely empathetic, not because you have transcended ego, but because you are real, because you are complex, because you are fully human, because you show others that it is possible to see clearly and still choose connection, to understand the mechanisms and still choose care, to recognize the masks and still choose to show up, to be present, to be vulnerable, to be strong, to be all the contradictory things that humans are. This is the journey. This is the path. This is what lies under the mask. Not a pure, true self waiting to be discovered. Not a transcendent consciousness beyond ego, but simply this: awareness, complexity, contradiction, humanity, the ego at work, seen clearly, accepted fully, worked with consciously, the masks worn lightly, changed easily, acknowledged openly, the performance done skillfully, authentically, with full knowledge of what it is and why it matters. And this is enough. This is more than enough. This is everything. Because this is real. This is true. This is what we actually are, beneath all the illusions, beneath all the stories we tell about pure empathy and selfless care. We are egos, serving ourselves, wearing masks, performing our identities, seeking connection, needing others, using empathy strategically. And we are also genuine, authentic, caring, capable of real connection, real love, real intimacy. Both things are true. Both things are always true. And accepting this, living with this, choosing connection despite this, is what makes us human. So here is the final truth, the ultimate revelation, the thing that has been building throughout this entire exploration. Every bit of empathy hides ego. Yes, this is true. But every bit of ego also enables empathy. The ego is not the enemy of connection. It is the vehicle for connection. It is the structure that allows us to be selves in relation to other selves. It is the mechanism through which we care, through which we connect, through which we love. Without ego, there would be no empathy. Without self, there would be no care for others. Without masks, there would be no face to show. The ego and empathy are not opposites. They are partners. They are two sides of the same coin. They are inseparable aspects of human consciousness. And understanding this, accepting this, working with this, is what allows us to be fully human, fully alive, fully connected, not despite our ego, but through it, not by transcending our masks, but by wearing them consciously, not by eliminating self-interest, but by expanding it to include others. And so, the curtain falls on this act, but the show continues inside each of us, in the silence of our thoughts. The mask we have analyzed today, you may know it well. You may wear it, or perhaps you see it in someone you love. The comment section below is not a place for judgment. It is our stage for confessions, a safe space for observers. Use that space to share your story. What mask did you have to wear to survive? We want to hear from you. And if you felt understood here, subscribe. Because here, you are not alone. Together, we will keep unraveling human theater, one mask at a time. The next act is about to begin.